Awesome. Well, thanks, Rob. Appreciate that. Hi, Greg. Good morning. Good afternoon.
Yeah, it's afternoon here, 102.
Afternoon here. Good. Well, to everyone joining, good afternoon or good morning to you as well, depending upon where you are. Super excited to do this. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, make sure we're doing this right. New era of cyber threats. Are we in a new era? Yes, we are. So I get to talk to you about some of the kind of big picture business things. And Greg is going to talk to you about how we're going to fix all those. Greg being probably the smartest person I've ever talked to in cybersecurity. So um, I'm going to get out of the way as quick as possible. But for everyone attending, that's my role here is I get to try and talk to you about some of the big picture stuff. I have been doing this for a while, 25 years in technology, and I am excited to lead you through cyberspace's sprawl. So I'm going to talk fast, go through a lot of content, and then let you get to the good stuff, which is what Greg's got. But I also like to try and paint a picture because it makes things a little bit more interesting, at least for me. I grew up loving reading science fiction. Now, not everybody can say that, but I loved it. I think most people can say they've seen some good movies before. Maybe seen Blade Runner, one of my favorites. Maybe seen The Matrix. I think everybody can probably say they've seen The Matrix. So I want you to stop and think about security differently for a second. First off, picture cyberspace. If you're in Blade Runner, man, that you got a good picture of it. If not, go with The Matrix, all right? But cyberspace is a space. It is a lawless sprawl. There's not a lot governing cyberspace these days because it's pretty new, right? But it's not just some cloud. It is a neon lit war zone, right? So we're talking about auto dealers today here, but this applies to any business. We're focused on small, medium businesses. I'll tell you a little bit more about one step later. But that's the first thing I want you to do. And I want you to think about it. I'm going to talk about this from the perspective of auto dealers because that's who we tried to target today. But again, this applies to any small, medium businesses. In 2024, in auto dealers specifically, there was over $1 billion of cybercrime affected against auto dealers in 2024. So it is a lawless sprawl. So these breaches, when they occur, they're trouble. They risk your business, but believe it or not, there's also a bit of a security interest from a national perspective here as well. So first thing I want to do is get some misconceptions out of the way. Number one, we're too small. I hear this a lot. Foreign hackers, criminals in cyberspace, they don't care. They just want easy targets. They're not necessarily looking for big, small. I mean, some of them are, let's be real, but easy targets are better. Criminals are lazy. 15% of dealers are hit annually right now. 85% of them with phishing, 84% of consumers walk who get breached. Those are just stats. And every dealership today is a gateway to the US economy. That's another important point to consider here. So that's the first misconception. We're too small. Number two, our IT team's got me covered. Listen, IT is great. It's essential. It is necessary. It keeps systems running. That's its goal. We'll talk more about that. Number two, our IT team's got me covered. Listen, IT is great. It's essential. It is necessary. It keeps systems running. That's its goal. We'll talk more about that. Cybersecurity does need specialists. This was a very interesting study. I'm happy to share with anybody. It was not that long ago, a couple years ago. 17% of IT professionals passed the cybersecurity quiz, the lowest across industry surveyed. Now, I'm sure there's some IT professionals on here. The fact that you were on here and getting educated, I'm sure you were one of the 17% that passed that. But the reality is that was the lowest cohort of types of job titles that passed this cybersecurity. There was medical professionals, financial professionals, manufacturing, development, IT. Anyway, happy to share the study with you. It was very interesting because of something called the Dunning-Kruger effect, where when we know a little bit about something, we overestimate our knowledge into periphery areas, and that's what happened there. So the reality is, it takes specialists. So don't fight alone in that digital sprawl. Get some help. Here's the third one. I'm compliant. Compliance is great, but it is just a checkbox. FTC, PCI DSS, if you miss them, you lose contracts, you'll face fines. It's not good. But compliance is not mere window dressing. It is far from a guarantee of security. So this is an important component. Compliance is your shield. It's important, but it does not determine effective security necessarily. You need to look at it from two perspectives here. Um, real quick story here. I've done a lot of tests for dealers in particular where we would find that the business is technically compliant because they're protecting customer data, and yet I was able to get in and access the owners or the principals' personally identifiable information via their tax returns that were unencrypted on their desktop. Just an example. You want to make sure that you're protecting yourself and the business as well, not just compliance. Number four, we'd know. Now, Greg, I know you got some cool stuff to talk about this because you're the one that turned me on this whole concept of dwell time.
Yep.
But if you think about cyberspace as a place, and there are good parts of it, and there are bad parts of it, just like in cities today, there are good parts of town and bad parts of town. And you know, there's a poverty line that when you get below the poverty line, it shows. But in cyberspace, there's also this poverty line. We'll talk about more, but below the poverty line, unfortunately, a lot of the crime goes unseen. IBM found that hackers linger on average 188 days before detection. Imagine if someone had access to your business physically and was able to walk around with an invisibility cloak or whatever for 188 days. Watch how you pay your bills, watch how you enter your account information, watch your passwords. I don't know, watch how your combination to your safe. Just think about that for perspective. That's what hackers do. So below the poverty line, those breaches go unseen, and that dwell time, Greg, you're going to talk about that more, I'm sure, but it is devastating to a business. So invisible threats demand vigilant defenses. That's misconception number four. So let's talk about the reality, sticking with this fun hunters in the grid concept here. We have AIs that are roaming around cyberspace looking for trouble, wreaking havoc, breaking things, stealing. And a lot of them are nation states. I mean, they're hitting supply chains. They're very good. This was from last year. There was this one thing that hit the news. It was a multi-million-dollar wire fraud that happened from a phishing. Somebody was told to wire all this money, and they got on a conference with their seniors, with their higher ups, to make sure it was real. Turns out everyone in that conference was a fake, was a deep fake. They all had public personas. The criminals were able to produce AI deep fakes. The guy got on a conference, said, yeah, go ahead and send that money, and wired millions and millions of dollars. And there is certainly a national component to this as well. We are increasingly being targeted, auto dealers in particular, increasingly being targeted from foreign adversaries. So I'm going to define something here, a managed security service provider, MSSP. They are your specialists. They are the crack team of specialists that are going to focus on your security, because IT's job is to keep things running. Security's job is to keep things safe. Here's the problem. There is a 3 million person labor gap, workforce gap in cybersecurity. At the same time, there is a bit of a overload of IT professionals. There are some challenges in the job market for IT professionals, not for cybersecurity. There's a 3 million person plus labor gap. Why? It's a skilled talent that is unfortunately newer. It's newer. There's not enough people to fill the gap. So we want to help you fortify your little piece of cyberspace. We want to get you in a gated community, and that's what an MSSP does. The IT is, these two have different focuses. IT, keep it running, system uptime. MSSP, threat hunting, get the criminals. And there is this component of AI that is having a massive impact, and that's what's so exciting about what we're going to talk about today. Greg will get into it. But this has the biggest impact of reducing a breach. And these are all recent studies here. And specialists can outsmart some of these AI-driven attacks, but for the first time, I think we're going to have an AI on our side that can actually think on its own. So a little bit more on this: the guardians of the grid, your MSSPs, they're going to block foreign threats. They're going to protect data and country. The nation-state attacks are on the rise. Here's a little bit more on that for anyone in the auto business. You're gonna feel this one here on the next couple of slides. But China is leading in what's called zero-day and edge device attacks. I'll talk more about that. Your dealership's security strengthens America. Your business's security strengthens America. There is this thing in cyberspace called the poverty line. I mentioned it earlier. Let me define it a little bit more clearly. Believe it or not, it's a concept been around since 2011, this idea that there's a poverty line. Below the poverty line in cyberspace, you have weak tools, you don't have the right plans, you're vulnerable. Above it, you've got defenses, you've got pros, you're resilient to attack, and quite frankly, criminals would go somewhere easier. There are enough easy targets in cyberspace. They'll go find an easy one. So make sure you put your dealership above the line. Make sure you put your business above the line. Criminals will go find those easier targets. Here's a little bit more on this concept. Below the line, you have risks. You are exposed. You don't have the right security staff. It's like if you opened up a business in a bad part of town and you knew you can see it. There's broken windows, there's bars, there's crime happening on the streets. You're going to have different defenses than if you were open up in a high-end gated community part of town. And so you want to have those extra defenses. Same thing in cyberspace. See where you are. If you're below the poverty line, get above it. So we're talking about security staff, endpoints, training. The CDK breach that affected many auto dealers last year was fed by foreign actors, black suit. Where are they going to go next? There are a lot of targets. There were 15,000 some odd dealers affected by this. So anyway, don't be below the line. That's the message. All right. And we're going to talk about how to do that. So on that note, a lot of people talking about cybersecurity these days. There is a concept called the technology adoption curve that exists for technology since the icebox and on, that talks about technology going through this bell curve of technology. So as a business owner, the focus should be on the upswing of technology because that's what the criminals are deploying. So this is AI driven, things like XDR, SIM, SOAR strategies. We can talk about some of that. The problem is most businesses are allowing decades old perimeter and endpoint detection as the primary method of defense. Those are important. They're absolutely important, but they're not the newer ones. Those are on the tail end of the technology adoption curve. Kind of like back to the bad part of town. If you're in a bad part of town, you're going to do more than put a lock on the front door. And you're going to do more than maybe have a gate. You'll probably have some camera systems. You'll have automatic alerting that can call on the security team or the police. You'll have sensors on the windows, maybe some bars, depending upon where you are. Those are your edge devices versus just your doors, which are your endpoints, and your gate, which is your perimeter. So why IT doesn't necessarily do that? Because they're providing infrastructure and connectivity in cyberspace. It's like making sure your lot has power and water and utilities. Does it need it to run? Yeah, it ain't gonna run without it, but it's not the same as securing it in a bad part of town. So we're going to talk to you about how you can secure that lot, secure your business in cyberspace. We're going to talk about AI. It's great, but there's good AI and bad AI. In cyberspace, there's angels and demons. So there's demons running around wreaking havoc. As I said, we're going to talk about some of the angels that you can get on your side as well to fight them off. Okay, know your role. Prepare for threats and use modern tools. I think that's a great time to turn it over to you, Greg. Like I said earlier, Greg, like whenever I hear him talk about this stuff, I'm just floored. Smartest guy I've ever talked to in this space. Some amazing, amazing background and history. I'll let you talk about that. But Greg, tell us how we can handle this.
No problem. And I think that as I go through some of my slides, I'm going to dive a little bit deeper in some of the things you talked about as well. So let me share my screen. Awesome. Let me know if you can see my slideshow.
Yep. I can.
Awesome.
And look at you in presenter mode.
I know. Look at that. That's great. Well, I look at when you're in presenter mode, I do that so often. Like it looked normal to me, so I didn't say anything. So, hey, I want to thank everybody for taking a little bit of time this afternoon with us. I definitely appreciate it. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. So I'm Greg Skasny. I'm the co-founder and chief technology officer of Blueshift Cybersecurity. Blueshift's a relatively new company. We've only been around for a few years, but I've been doing IT and InfoSec for a very long time. I don't want to date myself, but I have every VAX VMS certification known to man, so that kind of gives you a little bit of my age. I have a degree in electrical engineering. I don't do electrical engineering at all. I do understand it. My focus is more on networking and communications. Prior to doing Blueshift, I spent most of my time doing offensive security. So I led red teams, I did penetration testing, adversary emulation, I wrote exploits, did risk management framework, vulnerability assessments, those sorts of things. So I got paid to be a bad guy, and it was a lot of fun. What spurred kind of Blueshift off was frustration out of me and my team of organizations not being able to detect even some of the easy things that we were doing. And that really got to me, especially for small, medium-sized business, small municipalities, the people who are really struggling because they didn't have the budget to hire a full SOC or to hire someone like Mandiant or CrowdStrike or these larger firms that charge a lot of money. So I'm like, we can find creative solutions to help these businesses detect and respond, because it's very, very important, to the threats that are out there. And that's how kind of how Blueshift got started. And we're a venture funded company. And we do a lot of cool stuff that I kind of go through. I teach at some cool places. Just so you know, I teach at NASA. I have a background in industrial control systems and in operational technology and those sorts of things. So I teach both red team tactics, basically how to hack into things like SCADA systems and those sorts of things, PLCs, and I teach defense of those systems as well, how to properly instrument and defend those things. I teach for the IRS, like it's either cool or not cool. I teach for intelligence. I teach for MITRE. I taught incident response at MacDill Air Force Base for MITRE. I teach for the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. I do a seminar for them, 2-day seminar every year on current adversary tactics and techniques and those sorts of things. I'm just really, really curious. I live in South Florida. I like to fish. I have a son. I do BJJ. I'm an eternal white belt. So, like I said, I love learning and I talk fast, and so I'll apologize for that. But I'm happy to answer questions. I can't see you raise your hand. Maybe Rob could see that. So if you have a question, I'm happy to answer questions as we go along. But I do talk fast, and I apologize for that. It's just a character flaw. So the one thing I don't have, because I'm very, very technical, I have no artistic capability whatsoever. So every picture you see in this presentation, I stole from somebody. It's a red teamers do. I'm using them under fair use, and please take anything I say as for educational use only. I'm not going to teach you how to be a hacker today, but there are some presentations that I do that. So everything here is used under fair use and for educational purposes only. First thing we need to do as we start talking about the proper way to defend your car dealerships or any business that matters, we got to flip your evil bit. You have to think like an attacker. You have to think about the worst things that they would do to your organization. What if they got a hold of this? What would that mean to our business? What if they did this? What if they found this piece of information? They found this system. You have to think like an attacker. It's very, very important. That's the only, you can't think of best case scenarios when you go to defend your organization. You have to think of worst case scenarios. Now, are those worst case scenarios always going to happen? No. You need to be able to plan for them. Doesn't mean you have to spend your whole budget on just those worst case scenarios, but they need to be part of what you call your threat model, right? So you're understanding how you're defending, what your crown jewels are, and what those ancillary systems are that, okay, these ancillary systems get compromised. What does that mean from a lost revenue perspective, a lost productivity perspective, for your dealership or your business, right? So everything I talk to from here on out is going to be, from that kind of attacker perspective. So let's look at car dealerships, right? So why would an attacker want to target a car dealership? Now, I pulled this quote from CDK, which I did it almost as a joke because I found it was hilarious. They put this quote up after they caused this massive, $1 billion issue with the car dealerships. And if you were a CDK customer, my condolences for what happened to you. But I think they were a big part of these statistics about this 35% of auto dealerships getting a cyber attack. But be that aside, why would I want to attack a car dealership? Well, it's a very rich data depository, right? And I guess I pulled this before I even saw Kevin's things that people think they're too small. Some car dealerships are not small. There's a lot of infrastructure there. There's a lot of data there. Just think about, I just bought a new car probably a month ago, right? I went into the dealership. I didn't sign a single piece of paper. Everything I did was on the computer. They have all my information. They pulled my credit score. I mean, you guys know all the data that you get. That is a gold mine for a cyber criminal. Unluckily for me, I do carry a high level security clearance. The OPM was breached. The Chinese have all my information already. So I'm not too, I take precautions to protect myself and my family from that. But your customers expect their data to be protected when they come in, and they give you all this data that it takes to buy or purchase or lease a vehicle. It's a gold mine of information. Getting that information, is worth a lot of money on the dark web to be able to sell that information off, right? Use that information to open up credit lines in your customers, do identity fraud, to black. It goes on and on and on what these guys do. The digital transformation, like I just talked about. Again, I walked in the dealership. Last time I bought a car was probably 10 years ago. I tend to keep my cars for a long time. And it was all, I filled out a bunch of paperwork. Like I said, this time, I didn't even bring out my pen. I think I used my pen to sign the check. That was about it. Everything from, giving them my driver's license to, checking off for the test drive to warranty information. Everything was done on a tablet, right? Everything I signed off from all the bank, everything was done. And that's not just for car dealers. Like every business is going to, using more and more cloud-based technologies and those sorts of things, CRM systems, all these things that create this unique attack surface for every business. Car dealerships are no different. As a matter of fact, probably more so than most, probably akin to more like, hospitals and things like that. I won't even go into supply chain vulnerabilities. You understand that. That's what CDK, that doesn't happen just to car dealerships. And CDK was one that was very, very visible, right? So CDK runs, your financials and inventory and all the other stuff that it does. There are other systems that you may not be aware of, that have supply chain vulnerabilities. One of them just came. There's a new one out. It's called from a backend system called NPM, which is a web-based technology that has a supply chain issue with it. You're probably using that in somewhere in your environment, and you don't even know it. Like those are the scary ones, the ones that are kind of hidden in other technologies you may be using. They could be cloud-based technologies, it could be on-prem technologies that you just don't know about. Those are the ones that become a problem. Um, so we have to those are hard problems to solve. We'll talk about how we can start to look at some of those sorts of things. You guys obviously have a large ransom potential, right? So disabling a dealership for a while obviously puts anything on hold. I know that a lot of dealerships went to back to paper. I would see, I would it would be very difficult for me to see how a dealership could function at anywhere near a level of profitability doing things all by paper if you were ransomed. So that there, you if you didn't have good practices and couldn't recover from that ransomware event, you're more likely to pay that ransom. While I don't agree with that, it's a business decision. Sometimes you just have to do that. So obviously that it can lead to financial loss and some other things we'll talk about with that too. So this is why this is a rich environment for people wanting to attack a car dealership, right? There's a lot of upside from an attacker, not a whole lot of downside because it's hard to get caught. Attribution, those sorts of things. So you can see these are some of the high profile ones. I just pulled this up the other day. Obviously, CDK was there and LAS Automotive. The biggest thing from these comes out to is the scale of some of these. When you have large dealerships, right? So they're all connected. Like LAS Automotive is more than 100 dealerships, right? Or different dealership websites. CDK affected 15,000 dealerships, right? These are large scale breaches, large scale implications to your industry. And they need to be taken seriously. Coons Automotive was a little bit while ago, but that was again 114,000 customers. They were part of a class action lawsuit that was settled. The issue with all of these, right? So, and again, you see these are all big numbers. The two biggest issues you're going to see that come out of these are one, it's a very high financial cost, right? So the average data breach cost to remediate for a medium to small business is about $4 million in the U.S. The CDK, like Adam said, like was close to $1 billion of loss. But what the worst part that comes out of it is probably the second part is customer trust. So just like anything, we deal with cybersecurity, you guys deal with selling cars. You know, the dealership I bought from, I will probably go buy from again because I trust them, right? They treated me very well. So they've started this relationship with me, right? That I want to go back to them next time I buy a car, because I was treated well. I think I got a fair price. I trust that they're going to do the right thing for me. A lot of customers who are surveyed said if they knew that a dealership was breached, they probably wouldn't go back there. Customer trust, especially when it comes to buying cars, I think is a huge um, repeat sales opportunity that could be lost if you're not taking the right steps to defend yourself. Sometimes it's inevitable, but most of the time, breaches that like this can be detected and stopped. And we're going to talk about some ways to do that and some unique technologies we can do to help with that sort of thing. So Adam touched on things like current tools like EDR and firewalls and those sorts of things, right? And there's a reason why these things fail. Now, we have AI systems. I'm going to show you some of them too. So when I asked my AI, well, why does it fail? And this is a quote it actually came out with. So our generative AI actually gave me a quote I could use in this presentation. But what it comes down to is traditional tools are not bad. You need to make yourself a hard target, and traditional tools configured in the right way can make you a hard target, right? If your firewalls are set up, if you're using proper VPN or remote access technologies, and I'm going to talk about some of that. Excuse me 1 second, I need to sneeze. Excuse me 1 second, I need to sneeze. 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 1 Sorry, I tried to mute myself, but um, the problem with them though is they're siloed, right? So you may have a firewall, that firewall and the data it's seeing isn't talking to your EDR that's sitting on your endpoints or your antivirus. It's not talking to your cloud systems. There's nothing that's holistically looking across everything in your organization, and that's the problem with those traditional things. Um, our system solves that problem, but in for most organizations, they're either looking at the endpoints and the edge, they're not putting the complete picture together. And adversaries know this, and it's why they they're able to get into some of these more traditional things because they know where the blind spots are at. Um, Everybody likes to focus on endpoint. When I say endpoint, that's things like your laptop or servers or things like that. The endpoint is the most monitored piece of infrastructure in any modern IT infrastructure. It's the most modern piece that's there. You have your antiviruses on there. You probably, if you have a SIM, you have SIM agents on there. You're logging things and all those sorts of things. Adversaries know this, right? They know that they're monitored like that. So they always look for ways to kind of hide within the shadows. And so they're going after things that are hard to monitor. Cloud environments are one of them. Again, hosted applications, edge devices, things like that are a little more difficult to monitor. So you really need to be able to take a holistic approach to modern threats and things like that. Um, Definitely high false positives and alert fatigue. This is what started kind of the whole thing with people paying attention to cyber. But remember way back when Target was breached, they had a security operations team at the time. They were getting alerts. They actually got alerts that showed that something was going on, but they didn't pay attention to them because they had alert fatigue. There were so many false positives and so many alerts coming in that it got lost in the noise. And that still continues to today, right? So alert fatigue is a real thing. And it just gets worse with the amount of data that we're collecting. So, and I want to give you an example of how much data actually is collected in an organization, or what we do is from real world examples. So our customers range from very small, probably 10 people in a company, to very, very large, multinational, 30, 40 location, tens of thousands of endpoints. Our smallest customers probably ingest 1 million events a day, right? So it's 1 million events. Could be is either a log or something coming from a system, but it's something that gets logged into our system. Our large customers ingest 1 million events a second. It is absolutely impossible for a human to look through that data and make any sense out of it. We need automation and we need AI, and that's why when you hear me talk about some of the AI solutions, is um, you need to collect all that data. It's an absolute necessity. But the only way we make useful and deterministic actions from that data is by utilizing technology, utilizing automation and AI to help us make those decisions. That's how we're going to end up beating the adversaries. So a lot of manual processes involved with that, right? So Adam talked about dwell time. Dwell time is, again, it's a time from an initial compromise on a piece of infrastructure. So the time a hacker gets access to something in your infrastructure to the time you detect it. The longer that dwell time is, the worse outcome of that breach is going to be. If your dwell time is small, you can take care of it, and you've detected an anomaly, you've responded to it, you fixed the issue, you got the adversary out, he hasn't exfiltrated any data, he hasn't ransomed anything. He just had this initial access or some kind of initial exploit, right? That's a very good outcome. Probably not reportable. You didn't lose anything, those sorts of things. When they get to sit inside your infrastructure for a long time, that's why the costs start to go up, right? So when they sit in your infrastructure for a long time, it means that you didn't detect it with your current tool set, right? Because you would have saw them that they were there, right? You don't know they're there. Once they finally let themselves known, because either you get a call from the FBI or CISA, and it's happened. So the FBI does, and then the CISA, which is Cybersecurity Infrastructure and Security Administration, they monitor infrastructure for adversary activity. And when they find that a company is breached, and after they've extracted enough information, which I don't agree with them waiting, but they do, they will then contact you and say, "Hey, listen, your infrastructure is being used to attack XYZ. Maybe it's being used as part of a botnet. Maybe it's being used to attack some national security assets." Those are all bad things, by the way. And that even goes back to the previous slide that I had with why you're a target, right? Your infrastructure alone, just the fact that you have computers and they're connected to the internet is of value to adversaries. Again, they can host illicit content there, and they can use it to be part of a botnet to attack other things. There was just a very, very large, the largest ever recorded, what they call distributed denial of service attack. That's when adversaries have control of very large botnets, and they use those botnets to send massive amounts of traffic from all over the globe to a single point. And they did it against Cloudflare. And I don't even remember the number because it was so astronomically high, um, that there's no way anybody besides someone like Cloudflare could ever deflect that amount of traffic. And it's because they have access to all this infrastructure. So just the criminals having access to your IT infrastructure is of value. Then I got off a little bit of tangent there, but that's why the FBI and those sorts of things will get a hold of you. So the longer that goes on, the more ingrained they get. So when they get that ingrained, what do you have to do? Well, now you've figured out they're there. You got to figure out what they're all into, right? So you're going to call a forensic investigator. You should call the first call you should call is to an attorney, just some free advice. If you ever breach, call your attorney first. Get everything under attorney-client privilege in case you're sued later. It's really good advice. You're going to need to start, going through your forensics, which is very, very expensive. You're probably going to have to buy new infrastructure, so new cloud services, new systems. Sometimes you're not going to be able to get these guys out if they're that far ingrained, right? So you're going to have downtime. You're going to have to report it for people who do compliance things. That's brand damage. It just goes up, and that's why the cost of a data breach is so much. It's all the after effect things that happen. So if you get to it very, very early, the point is you get to it very early, though you don't incur those costs. You have an event, you respond to that event, and you're good to go. Scalability with systems, right? So legacy systems have a hard time, traditional tools have a hard time, again, scaling with new technology. As new technology comes, it's either out of band, so you're not seeing that data. It doesn't have the ability to integrate with it. And so it's not moving at the speed of business. And security, unfortunately, has had that history of not moving at the speed of business. We're trying to change that, right? So it's no longer the security team against the business team, right? They need to work in concert. And the security team needs to work in concert to make sure that business can get done, that processes are in place that don't hinder business, but that we can keep that business secure. Legacy tools have a hard time with that, which is why we're moving this new thing. So this is an email I got from a customer, and this kind of goes to show with this non-holistic approach that I'm talking about. This actually just came in yesterday. Obviously, I won't tell you what the customer is or anything like that. So this is a customer that does not have our solution. They had what they call Sentinel-1, which is a very good EDR. So they had Sentinel-1. They had Sentinel-1 SOC looking at it. An attacker gained access to their firewall. Their firewall was integrated with their Active Directory. So if you don't know that, that's their, for people who aren't technical, that's what you log in, your username and passwords. So he was able to steal an Active Directory account. So most likely, they were able to download encrypted credentials, pull those offline. They had a weak password. They were able to crack that password. Now they have an account, right? None of their EDR, this is way outside the scope of what their endpoint software would be able to see. It's on a firewall where you can't install an EDR agent, right? So they have access to that firewall. They use that firewall, which I made some assumptions when I asked some questions about this because I've seen this attack before and I know exactly what this particular adversary group does. My guess is their firewall had a VPN tied into their firewall. So they're using their firewall and they're using a VPN with their Active Directory credentials for people to log in, which is a horrible practice. It's easy for people, but it's a horrible practice just for what happened here. That firewall, I won't say I made a guess what the vendor was. I'll tell people offline, but I won't say it here. But it's a vendor that's known for having issues like this. When they get access to your Active Directory, they're going to use that firewall then to pivot into your Active Directory servers, which again and they're going to use a legitimate account to do that. So your endpoint software is not going to see that because it's a legitimate access that it sees every day. It sees people VPNing every day. It sees people access their domain controllers every day. That's a normalized action, right? And the adversaries are playing on that. And they know that you're not looking for those exploits on your firewall. There are ways you can do that. If you integrate those firewall logs into an XDR system like ours, we can see when those things happen, right? But people don't do that. This is the problem with this traditional look on even people not taking advanced technology and applying it to traditional tools, right? They were from there, since they had the account, they accessed the machines. They were able to install some software called WinSCP. I don't know why they installed SSH, but that's for another time. But WinSCP is a secure file transfer program, right? So they were just able to exfiltrate data, encrypt it, and send it right out, right? And they have no idea what they took. My guess is that when they found WinSCP on one of their Active Directory servers, they probably popped the window. Now, they had a Sentinel-1 probably installed on their Active Directory servers, but WinSCP is a legitimate program, right? So it's not going to fire off. Your antivirus isn't going to alert on something like WinSCP being installed because it's legitimate. This is where using more advanced technology comes into play, right? So systems like ours look at things like your domain controllers. We know what software is installed on those domain controllers, and WinSCP would be outside the normal operation of what's installed on a domain controller. That would cause an alert for us to look at and actually trigger our AI to go look and see why was it installed, when was it installed, who installed it, those sorts of things. So it starts off that investigative route that would say, oh, we need to start doing things. But because they didn't have systems like we have now, they have no idea what was exfiltrated, and they have a problem. This just happened like 2 days ago, right? So this stuff happens all the time. There are ways to help combat this sort of thing. But again, if you're just using traditional tools, that's what causes issues. So these are the types of threats that will break you, right? And why they're unstoppable. So what people have to realize, and when I talk about these sorts of things, is that these are going to happen. Like if you're never make an organization that's not penetrable. Every organization, mine included, has a way that a determined adversary will breach your defenses. It's going to happen. And if you play the game of, nope, I want to make my systems impenetrable, I can tell you can turn off all your computers, throw them in a shredder. It doesn't matter. I did research with a data recovery company where we took drives that the U.S. government shredded. They gave them back to us, and using very classified and proprietary techniques, we were able to recover classified data from shredded hard drives, right? Very determined adversaries. You have to understand that at some point they're going to win. But when they win, the faster that you determine that they may had that win, and you fix the issue, the better it is for your organization, right? Again, like I told you, that you're less in that dwell time, right? So you have to give up the fact that it's going to happen, because to say that it's never going to happen means that you're going to be perfect. And these things right on this page will prove 100% that you can't be perfect. So the first one we'll talk about is what in Adam mentions, zero-day exploits. So if you don't know what a zero-day or an O-day is, it's a vulnerability that is unknown, that is being exploited in the wild, and this happens on a daily basis. We get reports of zero-day vulnerabilities for all kinds of different infrastructure. For Windows machines, Mac OS just had a zero-day vulnerability. Certain firewall vendors like Fortinet have a lot of zero-day vulnerabilities. Other ones, SonicWall just had one. So these are vulnerabilities that are being exploited in the wild by real adversaries, but the vendors didn't know about, and they don't have a patch for, right? So when these happen, you have to be very, very vigilant. You have to understand what's in your infrastructure. And I'm going to talk about that here in a second. They're impossible to prevent. You don't know they're there, right? I don't know they're there. They're always going to be existent for the time. Even I don't care who's writing the software. If your AI is writing software, I'll show you an example of that here in a second. It doesn't matter. There's things that are just unknown and unintended consequences of just the fact of writing software that's going to happen. And you're going to have these zero-day exploits. They're going to always be there, and there's nothing. It's almost impossible to get them out of the system. So this is why it's going to happen. Everybody, supply chain attacks. Again, you can't stop someone who you're doing business with from getting breached. You may have access into a critical part of your business, right? So we have to give effect that that's going to happen. That happens again all the time. CDK, you guys are familiar with, but there's been tons of others. MoveIt was a big one with the U.S. government. 3CX was a phone system software that we actually detected in some of our customers. There was one from a printer piece of software that we actually discovered ourselves. We were the first people to do it. These things happen all the time. Overwhelmed teams, right? So you don't have most. I would have guessed that most, if not all, the people on this call who have a dealership, you don't have a SOC, right? You don't have a security operations center. You have an IT manager or a couple IT teams, and their jobs, like Adam said, are very, very different. My skill set versus a guy from IT, I know a lot about IT. I know a ton about networking, right? I don't have the skill sets that your IT team does, right? So I can't configure an Active Directory server. I can steal every piece of information out of it that's there once it's set up. I can exploit it and do all kinds of bad stuff, but I don't have the skills to do the stuff, the day-to-day stuff that it takes to operate IT environments in in places like dealerships, and they're complex. Um, they have to deal with I always say this, in that IT teams, MSPs, and IT teams are some of the most underpaid, underappreciated people. They have to deal with so much. They have to at one minute say, okay, Jimmy can't print or Billy can't use Outlook. I got to fix that, and at the same time, I got to make sure our network is up to stuff. I have to do all of our patching. I got to do all these upgrades. I have to, the scope of what they have to do is tremendous, right? And we know that as an attacker, we know this. We know that IT guys can't be everywhere at once, and they're always overwhelmed. And that's a fact that they always take advantage of. The last one is what it calls misconfiguration and user error, insider threats. Insider threat is a big thing. There are two different types of insider threats, right? There's purposeful insiders, people who and that's a big thing for the U.S. government, maybe not so much for car dealerships, where people inside want to steal information and sell it for espionage purposes and those sort of things. And the U.S. government takes a very strong stance of educating people about those type of insider threats. But for most businesses, there's another side of type of insider threat, which is what this picture shows, is the unintentional insider, right? The person who clicks on that phishing email, the IT guy who makes a mistake in a configuration, the one who gives away information. Those are things that are always going to happen. To err is human, right? And that's going to happen. And sometimes those errors lead to data breaches. Actually, a lot of times those errors lead to data breaches. I have stories for days to talk about that. But so these are things we just can't control, right? So we have to be able to put boundaries around these things so we can detect when they happen and respond to them very, very quickly. So let's talk about AI. I love AI. I'm not an AI fanboy about like, hey, it's going to take over and it's going to be horrible and we're going to have Skynet and the Matrix and all this kind of stuff. AI is a tool, right? And AI is a tool the same way that a calculator is a tool. So I'll give you an example. When I did my engineering degree, I went into my first linear differential equations class, and they said, "Here's a slide rule. This is what we use to do. You're never going to see it again." I don't know how to use a slide rule. Here's your TI-89, which is a calculator, right? This is how you can do all your math from now on. And I can still use a TI-89. It was a tool that lets you to do things much, much quicker and much more accurately. That what you can do with a slide rule much more quickly. The slide rules are actually pretty accurate. AI is that type of tool. It's going to help people do things quicker, more accurately, and it is literally going to change the face of cybersecurity. But what is it really, if you don't know? So I put this little equation up here, right? So I'll take you back to your beginning algebra classes. If you remember from beginning algebra, this is a function, f of x equals y, right? So usually they give you the value of x, you're going to plug it into some function, and you're going to get the answer of which is y. AI is actually the exact opposite of that. In AI, when you train AI, you're giving it the answer, right? And you're asking a algorithm to determine the function. So like if you talk about machine learning, and I'll talk about this stuff is, what you're doing like machine learning, that's like visual systems, right? You're giving it a bunch of pictures and telling it, this picture's a chair, this picture's a chair, and it's a different chair and a different chair. And you're asking it to then generate functions that will tell it that this is a chair, right? And it remembers those functions and gives it weights and those sorts of things. And after you do that enough, billions and billions of times, a lot of computing power, you can then feed it an unknown piece of data, and it will try to tell you what that is, right? So that's how it all started. We still use that's what we call machine learning, right? And as I go up the chain of AI, it's still all kind of based on machine learning, and you see this kind of in everyday things. So in after kind of machine learning happened, we use machine learning in our detections, right? So we use it for anomaly detection. It's very, very good at that, where we can feed it a bunch of data and ask it to look for outliers, and it can do it very, very fast. It's a really cool piece of technology. And what they quickly learned is that, hey, I can take this machine learning algorithms and I can build these neural networks to do this in different layers. They call that deep learning. And that's when you start seeing things like auto-driving cars and facial recognition and all these sorts of things. And that's where we starting to get what we call narrow AI, right? So AI systems that are designed to do very specific tasks. Again, drive a car, recognize license plates, voice recognition, those sorts of things. These are models that have been trained on these massive amounts of data to be able to recognize things and give an output, give a deterministic probability of what it's seeing. Sounds complicated, and it is very, very complicated. You don't really know what it does. But the breakthrough really came from when they applied that methodology to natural language processing and generation of text, right? So statistical, I'm going to ask it a question. I want you to generate the statistical model of what the next likely word would be in an answer. And that's what most people think of AI, and it's called generative AI, right? So generative AI creates content, right? So you tell it something, you ask it a question. If you use Chat GPT, those sorts of things, generative AI is what we're using today. Now, generative AI is something that we use. We use a ton of it. I'm going to show you an example of some really neat things here, but it's just not us who use generative AI, right? So bad guys can use generative AI as well. And to kind of show you, I'm going to skip it on my screen here real quick. I'm going to show you an example of what I did. I won't run it because it takes a little bit of time, but I've already ran it on this. This is our AI system, our internal AI system. So we don't use things like Chat GPT and those sorts of things. We use our own AI systems. We have our own hardware. We have our own models the open source models, this is one of them that we run. This is the model here, and this is a model that's designed to write code. And to show you how bad guys can use this, I wrote this very simple prompt. It just said, "Hey, write me a Python program that will perform cyber reconnaissance against a class of IP addresses written in a certain format." And it took it about 3 minutes, and it put out this very nice Python program. Now, I ran it. It runs. It had a couple of errors, which AI usually does, but nothing that even a junior level, first year, my son who's 11, who knows Python, could debug it. This is a very well written program, right? Out of a very, very simple prompt. Now, if you think like an attacker and you put your evil bit in, the more information you feed these systems, the better output you get. Now, this system that we're using here doesn't have guardrails and things like OpenAI does or those ChatGPT. There's certain things that they won't let you ask their models. These models have none of that. Like, they're not abridged in any ways. They're uncensored, unfiltered. If you want to know how to build a bomb, it'll tell you how to build a bomb. And this is not hard to set up. And on the scale of things, this is us using the weights and models prompted. This is a very simple prompt. But what I'm getting at is again, imagine if I gave this some source code to a lot of things that you're going to use in organizations are open source, so giving the source code to those things, or I give it the parameters around a certain networking system that you have, and I ask it to find ways to penetrate that and then write exploits. It can do those sort of things, right? So again, this was very simplistic, and boom, it spit out again a very good program that will do network reconnaissance and tell me what's open and things I can do to anybody that I wish. Now, it's not legal, but it is legal to run that kind of stuff, but it's on a hairy edge. But this is the power of AI. Even if you don't know Python, which I know Python very, very well, this is a very easy language to read through. It's really not all that difficult. So it even tells you, like, okay, here's how to run a tool, here's the usage of it, here's some notes you need to worry about, here's what the sample output would look like. So it's very, very complete in what it does. Again, from a single sentence, you can kind of extrapolate from there what it means. Then we start getting into some of the newer things that we're using, and I'll show you. No, let me show you something else. What I did, I forgot because this was here. Just because bad guys can use it. Oh, I didn't mean to do that. Excuse me. Back over here. Here we go. Doesn't mean that good guys can't use it too, right? So this is an example of us using that same AI system for good, right? So what this is anytime we get an alert in our system, our analyst can ask our AI agents to analyze that particular piece of information. So I'm gonna scroll down here for a second to see all this. This is all the gobbledygook that came from this particular alert that we got that said, hey, there's an exploit attempt. This is all the log information here. This is hard to look at, right? This is hard even for now. I've been doing this for a long time. I know what all this means. But for even analysts to look through this, it takes a lot of time. AI can do this in seconds. In less than one or 2 seconds, it generates this output that says, I've analyzed that log. Here's what it means. Here's some recommendations. You know, it came from this IP address. You should probably block that. They're trying to exploit this particular vulnerability. It's sourced towards this machine. And it's doing this against a D-Link device, which is not my network. This is just a botnet doing reconnaissance, which I know that. But AI does this very, very quickly. If I was to have an analyst do this, it would probably take them 10 to 15 minutes to do this, where my AI can do this in less than a second. That's the power of the tool. And we do this across a lot of different things. This is why it's going to reshape cyber, because it can look at that information and it doesn't sleep. Like it will look at this information all the time and provide us with that context. And it can even do some really cool things, which I'm going to show here, when we get to what's called agentic AI. And you may have been hearing these terms. So agentic AI are AI systems that run autonomously, right? So they're set out to do a task. They run continuously. They do that task. They provide output. They can actually interface with other systems. They can make changes to other systems and those sorts of things with very little human oversight. So I do have an example of that I can show you real quick. My Zoom likes to hide my tabs. Actually, this is not going to be as impressive as the other ones, but this is impressive to me. This is a new system that we're developing called IntelliThreat for Microsoft 365, Office 365. What our agentic AI does is it looks through every piece of information that's coming in and out of Office 365, and it makes determinations on what it sees. It determined that there was a high volume of emails set in a short time frame. This is not an alert that we have like a playbook for. It's not programmed anywhere. It made the decision itself after looking at the data that this is an anomaly, and because we're seeing this high amount of volume of emails coming from a particular user at a particular time. I can't show you the whole alert because this is running at a customer, so I can't show you the customer data. But that's the power of agentic AI, that we don't have to do anything. I don't have to have an analyst sit and look through these logs. It's doing it on its own. It's making decisions about how risky this is from an initial standpoint. We run it through some classifiers to tell what the final risk score, and then from that risk score, it can take actions. It can say, I'm going to turn this user off because I think he's been compromised. I can block IP addresses. I can do all these different things within the system, and then it just lets us know what it's done. You have to be very careful with this, but it is extremely powerful. We can look through massive amounts of data and let it make decisions on things that there's no way a human ever could. And this is why this is going to change the industry and why we need this from a defensive cyber standpoint. The last piece comes down to what they call AGI, and about artificial general intelligence. Now, you're going to hear a lot of hype about this. We're nowhere near AGI. What we're doing right now is still fancy statistics, to be brutally honest with you. Companies like OpenAI and X and those places, Grok, and trying to do this stuff, they're always going to say, "Hey, we're close, we're close." They're trying to raise tens of billions of dollars for their valuation. The amount of compute it takes to do what we're doing now is massive. To get to this artificial general intelligence, which is an AI that possesses intelligence on par with a human, we're a long way from. Even though they're going to keep stringing you along to say that it's going to take something a little different than what we have now. I'm not saying the technology isn't impressive, because it absolutely is, and it's going to change the way we do a lot of different things. But we're a little bit ways from AGI. So that's kind of how we're using AI and those sorts of things. So that's that's why it's the future, right? And to understand it's just real-time detection, so it can analyze patterns of behaviors that we just can't do it as humans and do it at scale, which is really cool. It can automate responses if you're using the agentic part of it, so isolate systems, block most traffic, all those things you would do from an instant response perspective. Helps reduce that alert fatigue, both for my staff, like would really be the best way to do is to allow AI to take over that level 1, level 2 SOC analyst job, let it do it, and then you have more experienced SOC analyst taking care of the higher trade cat stuff and keeping the AI on track. So, and it can learn, right? That's the biggest thing. So the more data you feed into it, the more it starts to understand. It's really cool. And you can use external tools. So like we have like large threat intelligence databases. So we'll feed it that information too. So if we see an external IP address in a log, we don't know what it is, we'll run that against our threat intelligence. It comes back with what that thing's done in the past. We feed that to the AI as well. So now it can make better decisions and it doesn't hallucinate. I could actually give you hours presentations of like how to deal with AI and get it to give you good answers without trying to what they call hallucinate and do other things as well. So it's going to be the new security team for organizations going forward. Again, I talked about the agentic AI, the autonomous. That's really going to be the game changer for cyber. These agents that come out, they're not rule based. They're goal oriented. They adapt. They have memory. They plan things out. This is the stuff that we're working on right now for a lot of different systems. I wish I could say it was work, because it's not. It's really fun. I enjoy doing this. Me and my team of programming this stuff has been a lot of fun. So let's talk about why dealerships should like this. So we have a lot of car dealerships that are customers of ours. Some of them are very complex. I put this little network diagram because that's usually what they look like. These very complex network diagrams. And even with AI systems that you can't protect what you can't see. You need visibility into a lot of different things. Whether again, all those things I talked about, the AI can help you scale to do that. So for us, our system integrates with all kinds of different things and pulls all this data into a single repository, and we allow AI to help us manage and look at that data. So they can scale. It scales again very very well. It can integrate with existing both traditional security things and existing maybe not security things related, accounting systems, ERP systems, CRM systems, all the complexity that you have in there. Integrating with those things to get that kind of holistic view is something that again our system does and most AI systems could do as well. It needs to be cost effective. You don't want the solution to the problem to cost more than the problem itself, right? So in our case, we use a lot of open source software and things like that to help keep the cost down of the solution. If small businesses can't afford it, then why are we doing it, right? So it needs to be affordable by everybody. In compliance and reporting. So yeah, we actually have agentic AI, and its only job is to take the information like you saw in that last one and put it into a report briefing style to tell humans what that means, right? So and for compliance purposes and those sorts of things. Um, so how would you do it, right? I know we're going to run out of time here, so I'm going to try to be quick. You need to assess your current infrastructure, and this is really important. And I get it. Most IT teams don't have current diagrams and those sorts of things. You really need to know what's in your environment before you put it in a system like this, and you need to know in case there's an incident, those sorts of things. So you need to assess your current infrastructure. Choose a platform, hopefully ours. Leverage a managed service provider like One Step Tech. Plug it in, install your agents, and go. And then train your team, right? And when I say train your team, is there's a certain things even from an IT perspective that your team should know, and it really comes down to incident response. Get familiar with an incident response methodology. It doesn't mean you have to become a or they call it digital forensic incident response expert, but you should understand the methodologies, at least a high level plan of what happens when we have an issue. What are the steps we need to take? Who do we call? Who's our attorney? Where's our insurance? Those sorts of things. Who's the investigators we're going to use? All those sorts of things. Companies like ours, we do help with those sorts of things. Same thing with One Step Tech. But you need to have a plan. You need to understand at least the basics of an incident response. So when something happens, you're not running around panicking, that you have a methodology you're going to follow. And you can get. Oh, I should put on my big screen. You can help make sense of that, of what you're going to do and when you're going to do it, what's going to be most effective, right? That's really, really important. Because speed, I put this in here because the speed when you detect something is actually the most important thing. The faster that you detect, respond, lock down, contain, and remediate, the better your outcomes are going to be, right? So you need to be fast at those sorts of things, and I'll kind of skip to that. So last slide I have, again, future, it isn't really a cost. It's going to be your largest revenue protector. AI is going to be the thing that's going to push you forward with it. You need to shift from this kind of reactive defensive to more proactive measures, right? It can give you a competitive advantage. You want to protect your brand. I talked about trust. That's a big trust equals repeat sales. And it really comes down to the dollar is what it is. And burnout in IT is a real thing, right? So save your IT team, hire a security expert. AI never sleeps, right? So it can handle the heavy lifting without having to burn out your IT team. So I am right at the money, I think, at 2 o'clock. I don't know if there's any questions. I'll stop, take a drink of coffee, and I'm happy to answer any questions if people have questions after I went through all that fun stuff.
I
All
can
right.
just say, Greg, I'm glad you're on our side.
I try.
If anybody has any questions, feel free to put them in the chat or the Q&A. Let's see. We have one open. All right, here's one, Greg, from an anonymous attendee. How does Blueshift address the risk of hardware supply chain compromises where devices may be tampered with at the hardware or firmware level before deployment?
I love it. Yes. That's part of that holistic approach you take to gathering data. One of the things that we do is we set devices to look at all ingress and egress network traffic, right? On everything. Any place that you have an internet connection, a firewall, a VLO, doesn't matter. Any place that you have ingress or egress, so inbound and outbound network traffic, we have a device that monitors those sorts of traffic. One thing that those things have to, if there's some kind of hardware compromises, they're going to have to talk out to home base. Whether that's China, whatever the case may be, those things are all detectable, right? So detectable when they do, when with devices that shouldn't be doing that, start to do that, right? So that's an anomaly that could be detected. And we've actually seen that in cases. So it's a really good question. Usually that's not targeted towards, just to be brutally honest, like the last time that happened or supposedly happened, there's some, with Supermicro was when it happened, there's some controversy there. Those systems were actually targeted for a very specific vendor. That usually doesn't happen to commercial off-the-shelf hardware that goes into places like car dealerships, and it's not that it couldn't, it's just that's a very, very expensive, very painstaking process for an adversary to do. And so those are usually targeted towards government facilities or high-level technology companies and those sorts of things for that kind of threat model.
All right, let's see if there's any other questions. I don't see any at this time. I know we had this scheduled for 1 hour, so I think we're at time. I believe we will be sharing, well, we will be posting this on YouTube afterwards, so obviously anybody can view that. And then I believe also we'll be emailing the recording out as well, so you all can rewatch this or share it with anybody from your team that was not able to attend as well. Let's see, Greg or Kevin, any closing thoughts before we wrap up?
None from here. I want to thank everybody for taking the time. This is a super important topic. And like I said earlier, Greg, glad you're on our side.
I appreciate it. No, have fun.